Welcome to my last set of essays from 2025. This month is not so much an essay as a small collection of ideas that I didn't actually ever fully flesh out. Maybe things I'll be thinking about in 2026 and maybe things that will tickle your brain for 2026. Also, if you're not looking at the emails, I have a 5-episode podcast mini-series out with my dear friend Marlo Fiskin, where we have 5 conversations about movement class customs, things that happen in our warm-up, things that happen in conditioning, ways that we teach tricks. We call it Movement Class Custom Busters. And if you are interested in that link, you should shoot me a DM on Instagram, or you should go look at the links in my bio, or you should go to Marlo's page. You can find it kind of anywhere. Let's get started on these essays, though. Number 1, looking back. The world that was is always perfect in your memory, sweetened and embellished, the hard edges softened by the kindness of forgetting. The generation before me remembers a golden age when animals were in circus. My own nostalgia veers more towards the fringe days when a fabric teacher was so rare that you'd fly across the country, beg for an hour between their contracts, and hope that they would teach you something that you could use to get contracts. The world that was. What do we carry forward? What do we let sink into the past? I feel myself becoming my parents. This AI stuff is too much. These phones are rotting everyone's brains. But I really, really believe those things are true. My parents said that about TV. Theirs said that about radio. Maybe every generation feels that the world is too big and that the human desire to be connected is too insatiable. What would it feel like to be content with my own smallness? To accept that I will never know everyone and that no one will ever really know me? How much do I destroy trying to be understood? Number 2, how do we recognize coaching expertise in 2025? I have always been fascinated by industry-wide trends in circus education, partly because the industry is small enough to zoom out and actually see the whole picture. We are in a major handoff right now. The schools that were launched in the late 80s and early 90s are transitioning ownership or settling into nonprofit life. COVID accelerated the cracks in leadership pipelines. In the States, we have Smirkus, Ace Ico, Sanka, San Francisco, Juventus. Everyone has been navigating their own reshufflings, their own leadership changes. Meanwhile, the first generation of U.S. students raised within the circus is older now, but many of them treat coaching as a side gig. They weren't raised to believe that they could be artists. They became polished amateurs instead of career teachers or performers. My generation didn't help with that. We were raised on the 80s and 90s myth that everyone should be an artist, and we soured on the expensive education and dove headfirst into an anti-college wave after absorbing historic amounts of educational debt. The early 2010s internet made it seem like anyone could make it as a content creator or performer, and while a few big names did, COVID and politics have knocked much of that momentum out. In the meantime, circus disciplines have become more mainstreamed. Aerial, pole, parkour, partner acro, no longer weird. Capitalism did its predictable work. Commercialization, expansion, fragmentation. Coaching is losing its middle class. Students are chasing Instagram celebrities, and the deep practice masters are fading from view. Ask yourself, who shaped the teachers you follow online, and how would you know? 3, the value of subculture. A friend recently said, "I'm not interested in being known. I started in circus because it was niche and filled with weird people doing weird things." I get it. I miss when circus felt tiny and bizarre, when I felt strangely normal in a room full of oddballs. These subcultures definitely still exist, but circus is undeniably transforming. This is what we gently disagreed about. In my eyes, this growth was inevitable. The only question was how we would guide it. In the US, we didn't meaningfully shape this growth with the fervor that we would have needed to. Cirque du Soleil hires athletes now, not circus school grads. Smaller circus companies in the US hire circus artists, but then complain that the technical level isn't where they want it to be, even though the baseline skill is objectively higher than it's ever been. There are simply more people, and thus more mediocrity mixed in. The niche was never going to stay niche. The question now is, how do we preserve the weird people, and where and how can a subculture continue to live? 4. Living traditions. Circus technique emerges from oral tradition, passed from body to body, teacher to student. Capitalization freezes that process into a product, something clean and sellable. That's not inherently wrong. To transmit anything, you have to momentarily crystallize it. But the technique is still alive, despite the crystallization. Any method that you learn is a snapshot of a teacher's evolving practice, a moment in motion. You're part of that motion now, too. Lazy teachers repeat the same drills without change. Engaged teachers refine those drills constantly. Lazy teachers rely on advanced movers' natural gifts. Engaged teachers build advanced movers from the ground up. It's why so many great coaches prefer training young people. Young people are still biologically open to constructing awareness instead of cashing in early for quick trick results. Technique isn't static. It's a living lineage, and we are all responsible, whether it evolves or ossifies. A moment of circus. While helping a friend rehearse his one-man show in Vermont, I had one of those crystalline reminders about what circus actually is. Theater talks a lot about presence, about crafting it. But when it's at its best, circus doesn't mess around with presence. Circus is the real thing happening in real time, no pretend, and your attention sharpens because the stakes are real. Calling it a stunt misses the point. In good circus, the stunt is a doorway into something felt. The old traditions and aesthetics of circus, the sparkles, the hup hey, existed for a reason. They pulled focus toward that moment of presence instead of away from it. Some contemporary circus aesthetics strip so much of that away that they add the sort of theatrical distance. The simpler the theatrical layer, the more clearly the audience can see the feat. Circus is everyone holding their breath together as someone risks their ego or their body or their life. Someone once told me, I just like the cool flips. Honestly, same. The only part of that sentence I resist is the just. It's okay to like a cool flip. A cool flip is enough. 6. Complaining Part 2. This is a follow-up on my January essay. I have very little patience for complaints from myself, and even less patience for my endlessly patient partner. But oddly, I have a tremendous amount of patience for students and parents complaining. For every student who complains out loud, I assume that 10 of them stayed quiet. Most complaints aren't about the content of the complaint, they're about the tone. And I find myself tone agnostic to students' complaints. I take people at their words and sort out their tone later, even though the tone is carrying a lot of emotional information. I recently read a study on circus artists and pain, how pain becomes a part of circus identity, a shared cultural language. Maybe that's why complaints hit my nerves. In circus, discomfort is actually culturally dense. The tone that someone uses when they do decide to complain can reveal a vulnerability that the content can hide. In my experience, coaches who react more to the tone of a complaint than the complaint itself miss some vital information. But if the content is valid, I'll always listen for the complaint. What is solar punk? I was exposed to solar punk in the middle of the years. Solar punk is a kind of punk art aesthetic that imagines non-dystopic futures. Because everything begins as imagination before it can become social structure. This is part of why I've made my classes pay what you can. I want to see who shows up. I want to see what they choose to pay. I want to see how people navigate the awkwardness of bartering instead of being told what to do. If we want a future where arts education is a human right, we have to start practicing that now. Imagine, in a solar punk way, what you wish arts education could look like and how arts teachers could relate to each other. Is arts a profession limited to just a few people? Or can everyone get paid something for having an artistic life or cultural contribution? In this imagined future, does school ever stop? Or is learning, formal or informal, built into life across a lifespan? What is the arts' relationship to technology and innovation in a non-dystopic future? How do we see international arts working? How do we send our art to other places? Has a century of professionalization in arts performance and education been good for society? How can we push back against professionalization without giving up ground on what artists get paid? 8. Unpaid labor and the arts. Artists should be paid fairly for their labor. Artists are so underpaid. Every time I hear things like this, I tighten up a bit because it just rings so false and sometimes entitled from the people who say it. Some of the richest people in the world are artists. Not because they sell out, but because they scale their work well, because they are good at playing the game, at appealing to their audience, at making good work. Take your pick. If, when an artist makes money, they've sold out automatically, then definitionally, artists can never be paid well. If the authenticity of your work is tied to poverty wages, then we've created a vicious cycle of definitions. Often, the people who say artists should be paid better are people who are trying really hard to make work that they think is good, but who aren't making much money doing it. And I do wholeheartedly support these people, but they are often conflating their personal struggle with a societal problem, and that can reek of entitlement. The societal problem isn't that artists aren't paid well. It's that poverty is allowed to exist at all. If someone was guaranteed a basic income, some people would subsist on that little bit in order to spend their time creatively making art and getting better at their craft. Some people are interested in making art that can be commodified and professionalized, but community art is just as, if not more, valuable. And community art doesn't pay anymore. Anyone who wants to make art, whether they just want to make casual community art or spend time refining their craft to a really excellent level, should be able to do that without fearing for their survival. I just believe that the more powerful point here is no one should be underpaid for any labor, and poverty should be eradicated. Thanks for listening all year. You can check out my 2025 essays or my 2024 essays by clicking some of the links all over my website and getting them all sent to you. I'm looking forward to 2026, and I will see you there.